Well, Acting Prime Minister Richard Marles says the Coalition are running a smear campaign against the Albanese government's superannuation tax. To chat about the tax on unrealised gains in super accounts over $3 million is Labor MP and Assistant Treasurer Daniel Mulino and Liberal Senator Jonathan Duniam. Thank you so much to you both for coming on the program. Daniel, first to you. You have carriage over this superannuation tax and have also conceded that without indexation within 30 years, 1.2 million people will be hit by the new tax, not the 80,000 now. Why not just ease people's fears about it and index it now?
Well, thanks for having me on, Kenny. And look, I just want to go back to first principles on this, because I think with this measure that we're talking about, I think we need to think about the superannuation system as being a system that's there to provide people with a dignity in retirement. And, you know, I went back to Paul Keating's speech in 1991. It's about people provided with a basic standard of living. It's about providing people with certainty in retirement. And when accounts get above a certain threshold, there comes a point where it's not about those core rationales for the system anymore. There are some accounts at the moment in the super system of tens of millions of dollars and some in the hundreds of millions of dollars. And so for fairness, what we're saying is that when it gets above a certain threshold, there'll still be concessional treatment, but it'll just be at a less concessional rate. And this is actually not that different to a measure the previous government brought in, where they reduced the income threshold from $300,000 to $250,000, again, where the concessional treatment was still there, but it was reduced. And that measure brought in by the previous government, I think, is a sensible one, and it's based on the same kinds of fairness principles. It actually captures more people than the measure that we're talking about here.
It's not on unrealised gains, though. Jonathan, is the Coalition running a scare campaign, as the Deputy Prime Minister suggests?
Well, you know that the proponents of policies have nowhere else to go when they start calling questions about a policy and concerns being expressed on behalf of some of our community a scare campaign. I mean, frankly, there are questions that need to be answered, and you did pose the question, why not index it now to allay the concerns of a great many Australians who will be affected over the course of time by this policy today? There's one thing that Daniel didn't mention, and that is that people make investment decisions with certain parameters in mind, and when those parameters change, as this would cause, then they need to think twice about how they're investing their money. And people put money into their superannuation for their retirement. This is money they've earned. And then the government comes along and says, oh, well, we're now going to tax that at a certain value. I mean, I do wonder, though, I mean, this is, as you said, unrealised capital gains tax. We have other asset classes where the government could come along and say, well, that now is over a certain threshold value. We'd like to tax what it's worth as well, even though you haven't gone to realise the value of it. So it does open the door to a great many different changes this government could implement to raise revenue, and I think we should be concerned.
Daniel, our business editor Ross Greenwood believes that you're doing this to force people to switch from managed funds into industry funds, which are largely controlled by the unions. In industry funds as well, the government has a bit more control over where the money is allocated. What's your response?
No, this is not motivated by that, and people with $3 million accounts in either of those scenarios would be affected in the same way. And so that's certainly not any kind of motivation that I would see as being part of this. This is really just about making the system fairer and more sustainable. It's really just saying that above a certain level, the concessional treatment should be a bit less generous, where accounts get to very, very high levels. And this is something which, again, has been applied in the super system in a range of ways. And as I mentioned, the previous government, in fact, brought in measures themselves to reduce the income threshold from $300,000 to $250,000 based on very, very similar principles. So, look, they've had over 2 years to raise concerns about this. We brought this measure forward in the previous term. We took this measure to the election. And it does seem strange that we're now seeing this kind of scare campaign. And I might say some elements of the scare campaign being run by the opposition are flat out wrong. There was an op-ed in the paper today saying that it wouldn't apply to politicians, federal politicians, flat out wrong. And so I think there's a lot of stuff being thrown around by the opposition here, which is a bit irresponsible, frankly.
We've just got 30 seconds. Jonathan, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, sure. Look, we opposed it in the last term. We oppose it now. It is bad policy, and it is just a way of this government, who doesn't know how to control how it spends money, taking more of other people's money to pay for their promises. It's bad policy, and where does it stop? As I said before, it opens the door to a great many other ways to tax Australians, and I think that's what we need to be concerned about.